Good morning. It's Monday, the 18th of February, 2019. It's been a good morning of writing. It's actually been a bit of a thinky morning. I sort of let a lot of thoughts settle, and I was thinking about things that I'd read yesterday that have really helped me before I got stuck into writing this morning. And then while I was writing, I wasn't too sure about how it was going until it finished, and then I had a nice little revelation that set everything right, which was really nice. So I guess to explain, yesterday I did pretty good with writing. I wrote 3 components, and and felt like I was getting close to the end of the monologue. And then I didn't do a great deal else towards that. I just did other things for the day. But then in the evening, I've started to read a book of essays by J.M. Coetzee that I had started reading a little while ago, but hadn't got very far through. And then I started to read an essay on Beckett and on Les Murray and on Gerald Murnane and Daniel Defoe. And it particularly the essay on Gerald Murnane gave me a lot of really interesting pause to think about the style of writing that I'm doing. Particularly one, I think it was from his, I think that Coetzee was quoting from Barley Patch from Gerald Murnane when Murnane said, "I wish that all of my fiction had have been published as essays, that I wish an editor had have sort of forced me into publishing them as essays," which I thought was a really interesting consideration, and certainly something that I am very much working on here on this book. It's something that is inspired by obviously W.G. Sebald and the autobiographical style of Thomas Bernhard, and that general interest in blending fiction and non-fiction, and certainly presenting them as essays. It makes me think, I mean, in my case, I'm doing them as monologue, but an autobiographical essay style monologue, to be sure. It makes me think of David Foster Wallace and how, some of his best work was his essay work. And so that was all sort of lingering in my head. I've been thinking about editing. I know in some of the previous recordings that I've been making, I've been talking about how it's going to be on the cutting room floor that this novel starts to really come into the sort of quality that I'm looking towards. Even though I'm really happy with the words going down, I know that it's going to be through editing and minimalism and framing things in the right light that it's going to turn into the thing that I need it to be. And then after I finished writing this morning, I was thinking about what would follow, and I was thinking about what I'd written this morning, and what was going to follow was going to be a particular piece of action that led to the end of the monologue. But then I was thinking it's already had so much action in different regards, and I was thinking what would the purpose of more action be? Because in the first version of Beach Surgery, it was meant to excite, like any like an action film. But then, I mean, I don't really like action films, and it's not really what interests me. What interests me are really interesting ideas or imagery that's fascinating. And I had just written a passage that I've written a couple of times in the past and have reused from other stories, which I still really like. And I think this is the best version of it that I've written. And I just thought it would be such a waste of words and of time to have another piece of action to follow this. Instead, I know what the final component of the monologue was always going to be was, I guess, these two characters going into an empty shopping centre to go to sleep, which is one of my always present fantasies in my head. And that doesn't need to follow action. And in fact, it's so much better that it's not. And I've realised something that needs to. So the action was meant to trigger a particular response in a character, and I've just realised that response is much more powerfully triggered without the action, and that will then lead into the last part of the monologue. So I'm up to that point now. I won't write it now because it's time to get started on with the day. I'll write it tomorrow, or I was going to say later this evening perhaps, but I think I should just aim for the morning, write of a morning, read of an evening. And I'm really happy with that. And once this monologue's finished, I mean, thinking about the contents that is there, it's going to need some editing, it's going to need reshaping like I always knew it would, but it has shown me how to incorporate the beach surgery narrative into the monologue style so that it's thematically consistent with the rest of the book. I've taken a 20,000 word chapter and turned it into probably 4,000 or 5,000 words, and then other bits of the novel have helped to buffer and sonnambulate that between different parts, and that's what I needed to show myself how that was going to happen. So that's and it's taught me all sorts of things in the past few days about how much imagery do you need, how much description. I've had to say things in a particular succinct way in a style that I hope works. I certainly can imagine saying it out loud and making it work. I just hope it works on the page, but that will come through editing. Yeah, I really like it. I like the style. In reflecting upon how this sits in relation to some of the other Australian authors, particularly, that I'm feeling more resonance with Gerard Murnane, with Les Murray, particularly some of those authors. I feel this hits a particular aesthetic that blends, I guess, a particular German philosophical blend with a psychogeography tenor set in this Australian context, and projecting something of what it is to be in Australia. It's I mean, it's something I don't want to ruin too much by trying to improvise an articulation of it now, but I'm just feeling I'm feeling interesting things in relation to how it could possibly sit within a frame of some of those other authors that I really, really enjoy and resonate with in terms of their modest approach, in terms of Les Murray living in uh, um, I just drove there the other week off from Kalungaluk. What's his book called? Banya. From his modest space in Banya to thinking of Gerald Murnane moving inland Victoria, which I only got to see a bit of what that landscape looks like last year when I went to Swan Hill and some of those really beautiful inland areas of Victoria. And I really enjoy that, and I think about. I mean, I'm in Newcastle, which is not um, like either of those places, but at the same time, there's a quiet and small um, network of connectivity that gives me. Well, I mean, it's what the book's about. The book is about Newcastle and what it feels like in a city that's buffered by countryside, and what it feels like in both of those worlds, and you know the parallels that sink in between that, and that's probably enough for the morning. I think I better keep putting this into words on the paper instead of reflective improv sessions next to the window. I'll say goodbye. I hope you have a nice day, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning. I'll see you then.